Heathens! Today's video is going to be one I have not done in quite a while, and that is I am going to do my makeup while I talk about a movie, because I just watched Shelter, which is featuring Michael Shannon, and this is going to contain spoiler alerts, so if you have not seen it and plan to see it, maybe don't watch this until afterward. It's an older movie, so I think it came out in 2011 or something like that. So it's been out for a while, but if you plan on watching it, maybe don't watch this yet, and then come back. But if you haven't, and don't plan to, or if you have, I'd love for you to stick around, because I also have some questions. So I'm going to focus more on my makeup, I'm going to focus more on talking than on the makeup look, but I'm going to be doing the makeup look kind of inspired by the movie, because it's based around a storm. And so I'm going to do like a kind of storming type look. We'll see how it turns out. Anyway, so Michael Shannon plays the main character. His name is Curtis. And he works for some like construction or drilling-esque company. And he works, I guess, with like his best friend. So it starts with him, like, having these, well, okay, when you first go into the movie, sorry, this is going to be all over the place, because that's just how I tell stories. When you get into the movie, you find out that they have a daughter, Hannah, who is deaf. And, let me use some eye primer first, actually. And, they've got, like, doctor's appointments and stuff like that. Well, then Michael starts having, or I'm calling him Michael, that's his name. Curtis starts having these, like, really vivid nightmares about, like, a storm coming, and then something happening. And so the first nightmare, he's out in the yard with his daughter, and their dog gets loose off the leash because they're looking into the, like, off in the horizon because there's a storm coming, and he and his daughter are watching that. Dog gets off the leash, comes and attacks him, and, like, really gets into his arm, and is, like, trying to rip his arm off. Well, he wakes up in, like, an extremely cold sweat, like, freaking out, gasping for air, and now is a little paranoid of the dog, because he's like, something about that felt really real, like, he's even, like, touching his arm where he was bit, and does that for a few days. So, winds up making a, like, pin with chicken wire in the backyard for the dog. And, you know, he hasn't told his wife any of this, and so she's like, what exactly is going on? Because, you know, that's your dog, you've had him for a long time, he's always been an indoor dog, so why are we suddenly keeping him outside? And he tries to use the daughter as an excuse, and he's like, you know, with Hannah and everything that we've got going on, I figured that might just be for the best. And she's like, still don't understand. That doesn't really make any sense to me. And he's like, well, you know, it's my dog. So, okay. So, then he decides that he's going to start working on the tornado shelter, or storm shelter, that they already have in the backyard. So, I don't remember if it ever says where they live, but presumably it's somewhere where tornadoes and like are common, because there's an existing storm shelter, and as you find out later in the movie, there's like a siren that goes off that they're able to hear, which I know are common in places where it's common. That was redundant. But he's like, oh, I'm gonna start working on that. She's like, okay, don't know why, like, nothing really needs to be done to it, but okay. So he keeps hearing thunder, and, like, there's none there. He's even at work one day, and the guy he's working with, he makes a comment about, like, oh, it sounds like thunder, because on their job site, they can't work if it rains. And, you know, he's like, shit, sounds like thunder. And the guy's like, what sounds like thunder? This is when Curtis realizes, oh, he can't hear this. And he's, like, looking up at the sky, and it's completely clear, and it doesn't look like there's a storm coming. So he's like, alright, well, you know, whatever. And at some point, he's like, hey, since I'm working on that storm shelter, I think I'm going to borrow some equipment from work. Will you help me one Saturday, like, do some stuff? Because... Alright, wait, before this, because this is when he sees... Okay, so, told you, all over the place. Michael told me I should have taken notes. I probably should have taken notes. On one occasion, he hears the thunder and gets really, really sick at work. And, like, leaves in the middle of the day, just, like, drives off, winds up having to pull over to the side of the road, and conveniently pulls over in an area where they've got, like, these, like, the storage pod units for sale. And there's one, like, on clearance or whatever. So he goes home, and he does the math of, like, all the different supplies he thinks he's going to need to do what he wants to do to the storm shelter. And it winds up being, like, $6,000 something. Well, he doesn't have that. So he goes to the bank and is talking to the banker about taking out a loan, and he has to, like, tie it into his house. So it winds up being a home renovation loan. And the banker's like, you know, I'm telling you, this is a really risky move. Like, are you sure you want to do this? And Curtis is like, yes, I'm sure. And the guy's like, alright, you know, fine. It's your decision. And signs off on it. So Curtis goes and he gets all the supplies. And, so anyway, fast forward, he's at work, he's talking to his buddy, who's the guy on his crew. And, he's like, yeah, so I'm gonna be expanding the storm shelter. Do you want to come help me? I think I'm gonna do it one Saturday while wife and child are not home. Because the mom sells, like, homemade blankets and pillows and stuff at, like, a farmer's market type thing. They don't really emphasize a whole lot what it is, like, the scenario, but you see her and the daughter there on some occasion. So he wants to do it while they're not home. Because, again, she knows that he's going to work on the storm shelter, but she has no idea about all that's going into it. So the buddy's like, you sure about that? Like, that sounds like a bad idea. He's like, yeah, you know, it'll be fine. Everything's fine. So the friend's like, alright, you know, whatever, I'll come help you. And so, fast forward, they're at his house, digging with a backhoe into the ground right beside the storm shelter, so that he can put this storage unit, like, against the storm shelter, and then cut a hole in between to, like, expand. And, anyway, as he's in the ground, the buddy is, like, up top, and lo and behold, wife and daughter come home. So, immediately as she's pulling into the driveway, because there's, like, a work truck in the driveway, and she's like, what exactly is going on? So, she heads around back with the daughter, and the other guy's kind of like, oh shit, hey, you know, like, he's like, I know I'm not supposed to be here. Well, not like that, but like, what they're doing, because he gets from the look on her face, I guess, that she doesn't know, and so he's just like, yeah, hi. And Curtis, like, comes up out of the hole, and he tries to play it off, and he's like, oh, hey, and, like, walks towards them, and she's like, absolutely not. And she leaves really upset with the daughter. And he and the friend are like, okay, well, done goofed, but let's, you know, finish what we're doing because that's all we can do now. So then it's Curtis and the wife, I think her name is Sam, talking, you know, in the bedroom that night. And she's like, you know, what is wrong with you? Like, why would you do any of this without telling me? Like, where are you getting this money from? You know, we've got stuff coming up for the daughter. We have a lot of medical expenses. Excuse me. I believe right before this, she and the daughter had gone to see, I guess, like a specialist center to talk about getting the daughter a cochlear implant. And they were approved. And the insurance is going to cover a good bit of it. And the woman even makes a remark about, like, your husband's got good insurance. And, foreshadowing. And, so anyway, they're fighting about this, and she's like, you know, what exactly is going through your head? How are you paying for this? Like, we have other things to worry about other than a stupid storm shelter. And he's like, I know, but, like, it's something that needs to be done. And she's like, what are you even talking about right now? Like, he's like, it's hard to explain, you know, just trust me. She's like, I don't know about that, because it's a weird situation. So, they kind of get into it, and he's like, you know, whatever, I get why you're mad, but, like, we can do this, it'll be fine, like, we have the money to do everything we need to do. It's fine. And she's kind of like, okay, you know, whatever. Well, he goes to visit his mom. Someone had asked him earlier in the movie when the last time he went to visit his mom was, and he said it had been about a month. Apparently, Curtis is 35, and when he goes to talk to his mom, he asks her, how her symptoms started before she was diagnosed. She doesn't really remember. You come to find out that she is a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic and was diagnosed in her early 30s. So, like, now he's worried that maybe that's what's going on with him because, you know, his mom has it. And so he makes an appointment to see, like, a therapist. And it winds up that she is just a therapist, not, like, a full psychiatrist, so she can't prescribe him anything. But he still goes ahead and talks to her. And his doctor prescribes him some sleep pills. Because of the nightmares, he has not been sleeping. Well, he has one nightmare that, I believe it's the one where in his dream, Hannah gets kidnapped out of the truck. He has a lot of them, though, so it's hard to keep them straight. And it causes him to actually wet the bed, which is what actually, I guess, influenced him to finally go see his doctor about it. Because his wife also does not know that, because he was scared and embarrassed, so he didn't say anything. He just kept her away from the bed, because she was on her way to church. So anyway, he gets on these sleeping pills, and one night he takes too many of them. I think he's supposed to take 2, because he starts out with 2 in his hand, and then he's looking at it, and then dumps out like 4 more. So, he winds up taking like 5 or 6, and, wakes up in the middle of the night, well, wakes up, starts gasping to the point where he wakes up his wife, and he's over there, like, freaking out, struggling, gasping for air, speaking of, this pill bottle is open. Really weird. So she, like, rolls him over and starts calling 911 because he's seizing. And she gets 911 on the phone, and she's like, hey, please send an ambulance. Like, my husband's having a seizure. I don't know what's going on. So, in the midst of this, he kind of comes to, and he's got, like, blood on the bed. And he grabs the phone, and he's like, no, I'm fine. Like, don't send an ambulance. Well, they do anyway. And the paramedics are talking to him, and they're like, you know, we can still take you in if you want to at least have the doctor check you out. And he's like, no, I'll be fine. And so he goes back in, and the wife is like, okay, listen, you really need to tell me what's been going on. You've been acting weird, and now this, like, what is happening? So he finally tells her about the dreams, and says that the one he had just had, his coworker, whose name is, like, Dewart, had tried to, like, kill him. He had taken some kind of, like, working axe and shoved it into his leg. So, at work, he asks his boss if he can take that guy off of his crew. He's like, and he uses the excuse, like, oh, it's hard to manage someone that I'm so close to. And his boss is like, okay, like, I understand, but this is part of managing people. And he's like, I know, I get it. It just, in this situation, it would really mean a lot if he could be moved to a different crew. The boss is like, alright, whatever you say, like, I'll do it this one time. And then he makes a comment like, hey, you know, you've been missing a lot of work. And Curtis is like, I know, but I haven't let anything fall behind. And the boss is like, I know, just don't. Like, make sure everything still gets done. And Curtis is like, yeah, sorry, you know, my doctor's had a lot of doctor's appointments, blah, blah, blah. So, anyway, get back home, and he winds up, like, finishing up the shelter, and his wife is like, hey, I don't remember which order these two things happen in, so I'll start with this one. He has a nightmare that involves his wife. So they're at the breakfast table, and he winds up, like, jerking away from her, and she kind of figures it out, and she's like, was I in one of your nightmares? And he's like, yeah. She's like, can you get over that? And, you know, he pulls her close, and he's like, yeah, I can, that's fine, I'm sorry. And so then they're, you know, again, at the breakfast table, and she, like, looks out the door, because they've got this big sliding glass door, and she's like, who's that? There's, like, someone just standing in the backyard looking down at the storm shelter. And so Curtis freaks out, and he runs out there, and it's his boss. And Curtis is just like, hey, what you doing? And his boss says that Dewart, the buddy, had told him that Curtis had brought home some equipment from work to do a home project. And that was why Curtis wanted him off of his team. Which isn't true. The first part is, but not the second. And he's like, I didn't believe him, though, so I had to come see for myself. And Curtis was like, no, I mean, yeah, it was just a hauler and a backhoe, but, you know, we had everything back in 8 hours, and, you know, no big deal, right? The boss is like, wrong. Like, what would have happened if you had hurt someone, or if you had gotten hurt? Like, I can't have that kind of lawsuit. It would bankrupt me. Curtis is like, yeah, I know, I'm sorry. And, he's like, I'll do whatever I can, you know, to make it right. And the boss is like, okay, you can come pick up your final check on Friday. Letting him go. And Curtis is like, are you serious? So, boss man, ex-boss man, leaves. Curtis goes inside and tells them that he has been fired. The wife comes up to him, slaps him, gets the daughter, and leaves. So he's just kind of standing there. I think at this point, he goes back to see his therapist, who is not there. There's some guy in her office. And he's like, where's Kendra, the therapist? And the guy's like, oh, she got transferred, so I split her patient load with another doctor here, so I'll be seeing you. And he's like, okay, fine. Sits down. The guy opens the little file on him. And he's like, yeah, so I see here that your mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia in her early 30s. Let's start there. And Curtis is like, no. Just gets up and walks out. And, so, like, at this point, everything's kind of falling apart around him. He lost his job. His wife's mad. He's still having these, like, nightmare visions. His therapist got replaced. It's just bad luck, okay? So, anyway, fast forward. They're at home. The wife did come back with the daughter. And they're talking it out. She's counting up the money that they had saved for their beach trip, which they apparently take to Myrtle Beach every year. And I was like, that's here. And she tells him, with that and his final check, they'll be fine for about 2 months as far as bills go. The daughter's surgery was supposed to be in 6 weeks. He only has his benefits for 2 extra weeks. So she's like, in the meantime, you'll find another job, I'll find a job, like, we'll make it work, it's fine. They make up, everything's good. Well, she asks him to come with her to some, like, church lunch function that they're having, and he's like, I really don't want to see those people. And she asks him again, she's like, please, like, I really need to do something normal. He's like, yeah, okay, I get it. So he agrees to go with her. They show up. He's making the plates, blah, blah, blah. Well, after they sit down, because he had seen Dewart, like, back in the kitchen while he was getting food, and they made, like, awkward eye contact. And then, nothing. So, he's sitting down with the family, they're eating. Oh, that's the thing. When the boss came by and wound up firing Curtis, he asked about Dewart. He's like, well, what about him? Did you fire him too? And the boss is like, no, but he's on 2-week leave, no pay. So they're sitting down eating, and Dewart comes around, and he's like, Curtis is immediately like, hey, not here. Like, they're in a room full of people and kids. And Dewart's like, well, I've been telling people what you're doing, man. And Curtis is like, yeah, I know. And he's like, you kicked me off your crew. Is that how you treat friends after all we've been through, after all I helped you do? Curtis is like, I know, not here. We can talk about it later. And they wind up getting into a fight. And Curtis winds up flipping a table, and he's just, like, screaming at everyone, and he's like, I know y'all are being told that I'm crazy, but I'm not crazy. There's a storm coming, and it's going to be worse than anything y'all have ever seen, and when it does, I'm going to be prepared, and you're not. Like, I know what's happening. And so everyone's just kind of looking at him, like, what is going on right now? They're all a little on edge because they were just fighting. So, anyway, he starts crying. They leave. Well, his brother comes by, worried, because the wife called him. This was before. And he winds up giving the brother the dog. So he doesn't have his dog anymore. And, sorry, I ran out of that other setting spray while I was using it. So, one night, they're in bed, and the siren starts going off. You know, the storm siren. And the wife wakes Curtis up, and she's like, oh my god, let's go. They go get Hannah, they rush out to the storm shelter. He's bought these gas masks for them to wear, and then bought like a little oxygen mask for Hannah. Like an actual whole oxygen tank, but with one of those little, like, you know, face bits. I don't know what they're called. So he makes everyone put on their masks, and he's like, alright, we're just gonna stay here until the storm ends. Like, this is it. So they stay there, I think, for, like, a full day. And, he wakes up at some point, like, in the middle of the night, everyone's sleeping, and he goes and he, like, puts his hand up on the storm door, and, like, can still hear thunder. So he goes back down, and then it, like, fast forwards to the wife waking him up, and he's, like, on the ground. Her and the daughter both have their masks off, and he's like, oh my god, where are your masks? What are you doing? She's like, we took them off. We're fine. Everything's fine. Take yours off. So she, like, begs and pleads with him to open the storm door. She's like, it's over. He's like, it's not over. Like, it's still storming. And she's like, I would not lie to you. It's not. So, since the daughter is deaf and is a little more sensitive to things, he asks her if she's feeling thunder, to which she also says no. And at this point, he's like, but cannot bring himself to unlock the storm door. So he tries to hand her the key, and she's like, no. Like, if you want to stay with us, this is something that you have to do. Like, this is you. And, so he finally gets up the, like, I guess courage, because energy isn't the right word, to unlock it. He unlocks it, throws the door open, and there's just sunlight. He's looking around, and there's, like, neighbors picking up, like, fallen leaves and debris and stuff out of their yard. But otherwise, everything's fine. So, like, it was a storm, but it wasn't this, like, crazy world-ending, you know, storm. And so they go see someone else, I guess some kind of doctor. And he tells them that he thinks Curtis getting away from the storm shelter for a while would be good. And the wife's like, well, you know, we usually go to Myrtle Beach, and, like, we have this beach fun, but we weren't going to go this year. And the guy's like, no, I think that would be a really good idea, but, like, when y'all come back, I think Curtis is going to still need a little more time away from the shelter than that. And, they're both like, what do you mean? And he's like, I think he's going to need some hands-on therapy at a facility. And Curtis, like, gets really upset, and he's like, you mean I have to leave my family? Which is one thing he never wanted to do, because when his mom had her first break, she had left him in a car in a parking lot, and then she was found, like, a week later digging through a dumpster. So, like, that's always been kind of a thing that he's been hung up on, is leaving his family. And, doctor's like, yeah, I'm sorry. So, fast forward, like, they go to the beach. He and Hannah are out on the sand having fun, building sandcastles. And Hannah stands up, so, like, the ASL sign for storm is like this. And, she, like, stands up and is, like, looking off in the distance. And he looks at her and he's like, you know, what's wrong? And she signs for storm. And he's like, what? So he turns around, and they don't show you immediately, but they do show the wife start to come out of the house, and there's like another sliding glass door. And in the reflection of the window, you can start to see what's happening, and you see 2 tornadoes form out on the water. And while the wife is standing out there, it starts to rain a little bit, and she catches some on her hand, and it's this thick motor oil color, which is exactly what he said he saw in all of his dreams. So, like, they look at each other, and they both kind of, like, nod their head, and then it shows, like, all these tornadoes forming in the back, and, they rush in the house. What happens then? No, that's it. That's where it ends, and that's why I'm a little annoyed with it. But, you know, I wouldn't be annoyed if they were at home, you know? Because, like, let's say he was having these visions because he clearly knew something was coming. If he was at home, they could have at least gone back in the storm shelter, and it's not all for naught. You know what I mean? But, like, as is, they're here at the beach, in a beach house, on the beach, with all these tornadoes coming in. And so I don't know if it leaves off because, like, they're in an area where it's not going to hit, and it's going to hit where they live, or if it's just like, oh well, I guess this is it, and they know they're not going to make it. It just kind of ends. So that's where my questions come in. If you've watched it, I want to know how you interpret that ending, and kind of how you felt throughout the entire movie. Because, I'll be honest, it's a long movie. It's like 2 hours and 2 minutes or something. About 30 minutes into it, I was like, kind of a slow build up. Like, I don't know how much I'm going to enjoy this. But, like, once stuff picks up, it was worth continuing to watch. So, let me know if you have watched this movie, what you think of it, how you interpret the end. Let me know what you think of my makeup look. It kind of took a different direction once I started going. I stayed, like, stormy, smoky, motor oil colored with the eyes, and then got a little carried away with the highlighter, as I do. But anyway, let me know your thoughts down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Subscribe to see more of my content, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.